al-Halaqi states that Syria continues to work for a political solution and to restore security and stability throughout the country. Al-Muallim tells the Indonesian and Lebanese foreign ministers that Syria supports the Geneva conference. And the Turkish authorities detain demonstrators, including journalists, because they insist on exposing the crimes of Erdogan's forces against protesters in Istanbul. Good afternoon, welcome to our news bulletin. I'm Dania Nizam. Prime Minister Dr. Wael Halaqi renewed his call to those who were involved in carrying arms to hand their weapons and participate in the reconstruction of our homeland. The Prime Minister pointed out in a meeting with the Popular Activities Delegation from Dar'a Governorate that Syria is heading to the political process and the return of security and stability on all its lands to practice the political, economical and social life in the united, renewable and democratic Syria as land and people. Premier al-Halaqi said that the government keenness to meet all the Syrian people's components and from all the provinces and governorates is to reach a joint vision that will enhance the dialogue process and the national unity, as well as to consider the lively and service conditions of the citizens and solve them with the possible means. Prime Minister Dr. Wael Halaqi asserted that the UN Security Council Resolution number 2118 about Syria is in line with Syria's declared attitude of joining the agreement forbidding chemical weapons. That is why Syria welcomed this resolution. In an interview with Al Manar TV station, he said the resolution was the result of dialogue, contacts and several meetings between Russia and America. Syria will continue to abide by this resolution and to work for what it has been calling for several years, which is to empty this region of all weapons of mass destruction. Syria will cooperate with the UN because it believes that such weapons would be used only in cases of despair and breakdown. Syria would never reach such cases because it is advancing towards victory. The Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim asserted that Syria is ready to go to Geneva and to open dialogue with the national opposition. However, Syria will never surrender authority to anybody. In an interview with the Sky News TV station, Mr. al-Muallim said the Geneva conference could set up a political program and work document that would be the subject of popular referendum. The Syrian people are authorized to determine their own future. He stressed that any solution that is rejected by the Syrian people could never be implemented. The ability of the Geneva conference is based on finding a real solution. The Syrian government is ready to hold dialogue with all the opposition parties licensed in Syria. The national opposition may differ with the government about certain questions and seek a solution through dialogue and through participation in a government of national unity and in parliamentary elections. Al-Muallim added that the West depended on a Doha coalition, which is rejected by the Syrians after it called upon the US to wage aggression on Syria. There is a national opposition inside Syria which has not been contacted to join the Geneva conference. Al-Muallim condemned the party that was formed in Doha to call for attacking its own people. Yet the Americans and their agents consider this party as the only representative of the opposition. Al-Muallim added that the crisis could move towards solution if the US and the other countries that intervene in Syria were to change their intentions and were to support the international agreement that approved the UN Security Resolution 2118. America and its allies should also stop financing and arming the terrorist gangs. He pointed out that the UN mentioned the middle of next November as the time of the Geneva conference. However, it has not given a pinpoint date yet. He said President Assad is Syria's elected leader until the time of the next presidential elections in the middle of next year. Nobody could doubt his legitimacy. He added that Syria joined the agreement forbidding chemical weapons. Regardless of the UN Security Council resolution, Syria is serious about carrying out its commitments to this agreement. Syria hopes that the approval of the said resolution in the Security Council would pave the way of non-interference of the Western countries in the internal affairs of other states. It is unreasonable that the American army should fight terrorism in Afghanistan and support terrorism in Syria. Security Council resolution should open the way of changing the American policy concerning the combat of terrorism in Syria. Mr. Muallim asserted that chemical weapons can be compensated by other deterrent weapons that are not internationally forbidden. Giving up this weapon came after terrorist gangs used chemical weapons. This made the Syrian government consider the danger from the angle of the necessity to protect the Syrian people. The Russian initiative about chemical weapons in Syria was discussed in the 20 summit, where President Putin conveyed it to American President Obama. Russia gave the UN the proof and evidence which Syria offered to show that the terrorists used chemical weapons. However, no UN official had expressed an opinion about this. On the other hand, Mr. Muallim told the Russia Today English TV channel that the crisis in Syria would be solved within a few weeks if the Western countries and their agents in the Gulf stopped their support for the terrorist groups. As long as the US, Europe and some Gulf countries continue to support the terrorist groups, the crisis will continue. In the current session 68 of the UN General Assembly, Foreign Minister Walid Muallim gave his Indonesian counterpart Martin Natlegawa information about the dimension of the plot against Syria. He asserted Syria's support of the Geneva II conference in order to find a political solution for the crisis. The Indonesian Foreign Minister expressed Indonesia's keenness to preserve Syria's security, stability and future. He stressed the depth of relations between the two countries, asserting that Syria's future could only be determined by the Syrian people away from any foreign intervention. He also welcomed Syria's joining of the agreement forbidding chemical weapons. Mr. Muallim also met the Lebanese Foreign Minister Adnan Mansour. They talked about developments in the Arab region and stressed the necessity of finding a political solution for the crisis in Syria. Mr. Mansour affirmed the rejection of any foreign intervention in Syria's internal affairs and the necessity of preserving its security, sovereignty and stability. Syria's permanent representative at the UN, Dr. Bashar al-Jafari, asserted the importance of Resolution 2118 lies in the fact that it has restored the whole diplomatic process to the UN Security Council. This would prevent any movement outside legitimacy and international unanimity. The resolution came as a step forward towards fixing the situation politically in Syria and enabling the UN Security Council to work according to collective mechanisms to protect world peace and security. Al-Jafari added that the US, Britain and France would no longer dare to speak with the language of military aggression or to block international unanimity for any reason. This resolution makes everybody abide by Article 25 of the UN Charter and cooperate to implement the resolution. The resolution strongly supports Syria's sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity. Everybody adopted this principle. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov asserted that the opposition in Syria owns chemical weapons. There are increasing proof to show that. He said Russia picked up a telephone conversation between two armed terrorists about the use of chemical weapons. This question was raised with the American and European colleagues and those in the countries supporting the Syrian opposition. Russia called for putting pressure on those agents to desist from any new attempt to possess or to use chemical weapons. Russia knows that the opposition tried to carry out such provocative acts in Syria more than once. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister for the Arab and African Affairs, Hossein Amir Abdullah, stressed that Iran will use the recent convergence with the West, especially the United States, to solve the Syrian crisis. Abdullah said that Tehran's stand is firm and clear concerning Syria, stressing from the beginning Iran is with the political solution to the crisis as the new government in Iran doesn't change from the same track. Iran is calling to activate the political process and to work for stopping the violence and supporting the armed men with weapons in Syria. Abdullah considered that the whole region is suffering from the repercussions of the events in Syria because what is happening there led to the existence of the extremists in the neighboring countries. As the discussion nowadays are very clear about the existence of Al-Qaeda members and extremists gathering in Syria, expressing his sorrow regarding some sides and regional international powers' support to the change of the Syrian government for their own benefits. He warned that the consequences of any change in Syria will reach all the states in the region. Syrian Arab Army units achieved a great progress at the axes of Qabun, Zamalka and Jobar of Damascus countryside after conducting a number of operations eliminating the terrorist gatherings and destroying their hideouts in the area. Syrian Arab Army units maintained control over an area of 1.5 kilometers of Al-Qabun industrial area towards Zamalka from the side of the southern highway, separating the terrorist groups and cutting off the roads of supplying them with weapons and ammunition on the roads linking between Zamalka, Jobar and Arbin. The source added that a tunnel used by the terrorists was found in Jobar neighborhood, stretching at a length of 150 meters and a height of 1.3 meters, starting from an old traditional house into the graveyard of the neighborhood. Also, a number of 10-meter long tunnels were found under the main street containing anti-tank explosive devices. Their weights range between 30 and 40 kilograms. The source pointed out that different kinds of weapons were also found as they were left by the terrorists who were killed at the hands of Syrian Arab Army soldiers. In Hama, a Syrian Arab Army unit, in cooperating with the people, chased a terrorist gang and captured most of its members in the orchards. They confiscated several weapons, explosive devices, bombs, and modern sophisticated communication equipment, in addition to large amounts of ammunition. The involvement of Erdogan's government in the terrorist acts in Syria was clear to the whole world. It necessitated the call by Syrian UN representative during the Security Council meeting to abide by the UN resolution on Syria number 2118 and to stop supporting terrorism.
The involvement of the Turkish government in supporting terrorist groups who belong to Al-Qaeda is no longer a secret. The Turkish newspaper Yort asserted that Erdogan's government has given the terrorists special vehicles to carry them across the border into Syria in an open way. Those terrorists belong to the so-called Al-Nusra Front. The paper said the vehicles were given to the terrorists on both sides of the borders with Syria, particularly in Al-Rihaniya. The terrorists crossed into Turkey and were seen by everybody. The paper correspondent Omar Odamish warned that this situation paved the way for the terrorist actions. The vehicles smuggle both terrorists and weapons across the border before the eyes of the Turkish soldiers.
All states have to abide by this resolution. All states, including those neighboring countries of Syria who are providing haven and supporting the terrorists and the armed groups into my country. So the Turkish government, the Saudi government, the Qatari government, the French government, the American government, the British government are all held accountable in accordance with this resolution. And they should all abide by this provision.
Erdogan's police went too far in repelling those who opposed the policies of the Justice and Development Party. Erdogan's forces arrested at least 15 demonstrators, including journalists who were organizing a rally to read a press release that discloses by evidence and documents the crimes committed by Erdogan's forces, who killed several demonstrators since the start of the protests at Taksim Square. Challenging the police of Justice and Development Party, hundreds of demonstrators gathered at Taksim Square, a thing which raised concern of the police, who retaliated by different means of repression in a desperate way in order to silence the voices of demonstrators. Clashes escalated between demonstrators and police, who blocked the roads leading to the square and imposed heavy security measures in and out of Gezi Park. With this, we end the news for today. Thank you for watching us. For more news about region and Syria, you can view this bulletin again at syriaonline.sy. God bless you and long live Syria. After the break, it's our economic news with Vanya.